Pretoria studios is political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe. Thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Your thoughts on this NEC meeting that's taking place now? We're never able to tell whether it's a long one or a short one, but they've been at it since 2 this afternoon. What's your reading of what might be happening behind closed doors?
Well, it's not going to be a short one because there are a number of challenges. The first thing what one must remember is that the ANC went into the conference very divided. And one of the messages that came very clear from that conference was the message of unity. And this is what the president of the ANC has been trying to preach. At the same time, we had the triumphalist grouping suggesting that President Zuma needs to step down. And this led to a situation where, despite the fact that the conference never took a decision, and understandably, some of these issues could be handled by the NEC of the ANC, some people within the NEC felt that it's time for the ANC to start having a new face, and they talked about the unity and renewal. So the pressure has been there within the ANC, but at the same time, it has been very difficult because Cyril Ramaphosa's victory of the leadership of the ANC was very small, less than 2%, and less than 200 members out of almost 5,000 members. So you have to be delicate in terms of how you approach that. And it's very important for the ANC to understand that next year they are going to elections. So you don't want to go to elections having many other people being disgruntled. This is why President of the ANC has been correct that this matter must be handled delicately. But unfortunately, the external pressures that comes from the UL forces, the opposition parties, and the mainstream media has been such that you are not going to talk about renewal as long as President Zuma is there. But what has emerged now is that the president of the ANC has suggested that they have had discussions that are constructive and there's hope. But unfortunately, the pressure coming from outside is so much that they had to call a special NEC meeting, which is meeting today. So it will grapple with those other issues. But Peter, what we need to understand, we've been here before. In the past, President Jacob Zuma was asked by some people to step down instead of being fired by Thabo Mbeki, and he refused. He felt that he is not going to make it easier for Thabo Mbeki. And he's doing exactly the same thing here to say the ANC, if some of them are approaching this in a manner that is vindictive, he's not going to make life easier for them. And he says, let them fire me, then I'll only respond then. But what he's also counting on is that the ANC will be forced to have serious discussions about the things that he has done wrong. And if you listen to Holomesa, he's actually correct to say, you've been shielding this person for the 9 years. Now, what is different? How are you going to explain that to society? So these are the deliberations that the ANC will have to factor in, that if you force him out, you still have to answer the question that why now? Why not in the last 9 years?
Okay, Professor Seepe, I think that those that are sitting inside the NEC and those that are arguing for the president to step down, their views have been fairly well articulated and perhaps even shared by people beyond them. I'm just wondering, those that are sitting inside that NEC right now arguing for President Zuma to stay, what could they be putting on the table as an argument?
Well, they could argue that, one, the matter was raised in conference, but it did not enjoy support. Remember, the ultimate power lies with the delegates, with the branches. And the branches were fully aware of all these things that are ventilated. But when it came to that matter, they were not convinced that it is sufficient for the ANC to come up with a resolution on that. So if you are going to say you are a party that receives a mandate, they can argue that you have no such mandate from the delegates. But the mandate that you have is a mandate that talks about land expropriation, it talks about free higher education, it talks about the radical economic transformation. They will be able to rattle those things. But they are also saying it is not that Jacob Zuma, the president or head of state, should not leave, but they are saying handle it in such a way that you don't divide the organization. And this is the message that the president of the ANC himself has been saying, that the unity is sacrosanct, and the way we handle these things should not lead to the antagonizing other members of the ANC. Remember, you're talking about the divided ANC. Let's not pretend that the totality of the ANC is in agreement on this matter. So the leadership of the ANC must manage that reality. If there was a sense of unity, this would have been as simple and as clear as what they did with Thabo Mbeki. They only had one meeting and Thabo Mbeki was out.
Are we saying that there's a genuine fear that if there is disunity, that the losing faction might form another political party, or are we past that now?
No, I don't think they will form another party, but what they can do, they can actually frustrate the new leadership of the ANC. I mean, some provinces are also beginning to argue
to what end?
Why
would they do that?
So desperate.
Why would they do that? It's their party.
Remember, yeah, but you see, yeah, but the point is that you have a political interest and individual interest. This is not just about the organization, it's also about people's interest. And there's also possibilities of purging of people, which happens all the time. So people are also concerned about their own interests. So even those who are calling for President Zuma to step down, it's not like it's altruistic. They also have political ambitions. So these are the things that the new leadership must find a way of navigating carefully, but also reminding each other that they have a historical mission. It's not an accident that the president of the ANC has been talking about the issues of unity, has been talking about give me time to handle this. Because what he wants to do, he wants to have a unified ANC so that it becomes a very strong machinery that will be able to contest elections without the provinces fighting against each other.
You know, people will be watching this and wondering, how did the African National Congress get to this point where, as you say, people have interests, they have political interests? Where did it stop being about interests for the party, serving the party and serving the people that support the ANC? When did the self come into the equation beyond the collective?
Yeah, I think a part of it is because the ANC failed to theorize the post-1994 dispensation. When you have nothing to lose, it's very easy to come out as if you are revolutionary, you're thinking about the collective. But once you get into power, and power brings about resources, and it brings about opportunities, then you started seeing a new behavior among members of the ANC. So that is something that they never dealt with. And even today, they still hanker to the past. The past was very different. The conditions of democracy throws up new challenges. You have members of the ANC who are in the same cells in the prisons. Some are millionaires, some are paupers, some they are very poor, some are in squalid conditions. So that begins to create a new dynamic, and it is that dynamic that they never talked about. So it is a understanding and conceptualizing and reinventing themselves. The ANC has failed to reinvent itself. It still talks about people like Sisulu, Mandela, Luthuli, and all that. But those lived under different conditions. New conditions require a new consciousness that takes into consideration all these personal interests which never existed in the past.
So the party might be split, and the NEC, as you said, 179 votes separated the two factions in the end. Do you think that one side is misreading the national mood? Because both sides can't have it right. Well, I think even the concept of a national mood, we must also look at it, because there is another national mood that is not on the table. And that national mood is reflected in the daily protests that are taking place. And when you listen to people in those daily protests, they're talking about the lack of delivery on water, sanitation, schooling, jobs, etc. And what we have is that you have different publics. So the question, if the ANC wants to win any election, it must address those people who are part of the majority. And that voice of the protesters who complain about what is happening on a daily basis, not about what happens at the national level, is what is not being heard. But at the same time, there is also a conflation where the media has also become partisan. And some of the members of the ANC, including people like Tito Mboweni, who was warning the ANC that don't get excited about the support of the media that pretends that it supports the new leadership.
or the markets, because that can change overnight. So there is that sophistication that needs to be dealt with within the ANC, and I think those are the things that when the ANC emerges out of this meeting, it should have considered all those implications. And if you have a side that is unhappy, they should be saying what are the steps that we're going to take to make sure that they are brought along. So I don't think it will be an easy meeting. But what is very clear is that President Zuma's time is up. And the issue is, how do you manage this? If they were talking about the transition. Now they've moved away from a transition, because what they want to do is to make sure that that transition is not prolonged, maybe to respond to the pressures that you are talking about the national mood. But as I say, the national mood is only tested through elections.
All right, so if there is all this pressure and as you say that he must go, the question is, how much time does the ANC still have? Is today the day? Tomorrow? How much time do they have before we start to see the opposition mobilizing people on the streets?
Well, the opposition has always been mobilizing people on the street, and the ANC has always continued to defend Jacob Zuma. But what is very clear is, now that you have a new leadership, understandably, it's very important, as you can understand, that there's a saying that says people worship the sun that is rising, not the sun that is setting. And people are beginning to position themselves to the future, and that future is opposed to Jacob Zuma's presidency. So I think the ANC has come to a realization that it cannot continue to be torn between this level of being unclear about where it's going. But I also think that even President Zuma himself is fully aware that there needs to be a new face that will take the ANC to the next election. So, but what he's demanding is that let's handle this in such a way that it does not lead to an embarrassment or humiliation. But those are the words that come from Cyril Ramaphosa. They don't come from Jacob Zuma, because his argument is that he has always been humiliated and without any support from some of his members.
The opposition parties today said that they want Parliament dissolved and they want elections to be held before a new president is elected. I wonder if that is possible, and what do you think they're trying to do?
Well, if you look at the news coverage in the last 2 years, the focus has been more on the ANC. It was first on the election, on the contest among members of the ANC who are contesting for leadership, and that was almost for 6 months, the opposition was almost non-existent. What they are doing now is to reclaim their lost territory, and by setting the agenda. So all this motion of no confidence is part of that, and they are beginning to succeed in that. But they are also raising a very important issue. What they are also saying is that if you're going to remove President Zuma because he violated the constitution, you must also remember that the Constitutional Court also found the Parliament wanting. And they're saying you cannot choose one and pretend that the rest was also okay. The Parliament was found to have failed to uphold and to make sure that the head of state accounts. And they've also, the Constitutional Court also found that they should have done more in terms of making sure that the decisions by public protector are actually acted upon. So there's the clarity among the opposition parties that the failure is not only in the head of state, Jacob Zuma, it's also in Parliament that is populated by the majority of members of the ANC. So they are using a language that is located in the judgment of the Constitutional Court, that it is not one person who has found to be wanting, but a collective. So it is a logical argument, but unfortunately, the question that you ask, is it feasible? I think when you are in a minority, you depend on the majority agreeing to that. And the ANC will make an assessment on whether going to elections right now gives them a better chance, or delaying it to recoup from the injuries and self-inflicted injuries is the way to go.
Do you think that it matters to the public, and by extension the voters of 2019, who is perceived to have managed President Zuma's exit?
No, I don't think it matters to the ordinary people. What ordinary people want is stability. What they want is that their concerns that they face on a daily basis are addressed. They are interested in the message that they gave through the branches, which were marching orders that emerged from the national conference, which deal with issues of social and economic inequalities, which deals with creating more opportunities for historically black people, which talks about small medium enterprises, which talks about free higher education for the poor. So those are the issues that affect them on a daily basis, including the usual ones of basic services, water, sanitation, and electricity, and also the roads and all that, because that is what is the cause of national protests, and those protests happens every day. And if the ANC is not going to respond to that, but is going to respond to the media, then the media is not going to be voting the ANC into power. It will be those people who are being ignored and neglected who will make sure that they withhold their vote or vote for another party.
All right. Perhaps finally, let's assume that the NEC has decided that President Zuma must resign, and he accedes to that. In his speech, what should he be saying? What do you think he might say?
Well, I think President Zuma has always argued, and one on the issue of Nkandla, which has been more the thing that has been used to whip him, is the judgment that said you fail to uphold. But his argument will be saying, I was given advice I got legal advice. And we must also be honest that the understanding of remedial actions was unclear, not only for President Zuma, but also for the judges. If you talk about the judge who dealt with the matter in the Western Cape, he felt that those remedial actions are not binding. So if the judges can get it wrong, but we've also seen in the Constitutional Court where judges themselves were disagreeing almost viciously against each other, where Mukhwe felt that the majority of members of the Constitutional Court had actually failed the basic test of making sure that the fundamentals of a democracy are protected, where there should not be any encroaching in another branch of the judiciary. So what he's going to say is that these things are not as clear-cut as you would make in mathematics. That's number one. Secondly, he'll say, I did my best, and he'll talk about some of these achievements. But I think those are some of the things that we do afterwards when somebody is gone.
Okay. Professor Sipho Seepe, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your insights. And I'm sure that, like many South Africans, they'll be waiting anxiously to find out what's happening in Irene. That was Professor Sipho Seepe, a commentator on political matters. Now, the